Natalie raised her head and bit her lip. She was so angry that she couldn't utter a single word. Her whole body was trembling with fury. She couldn't understand why Cheryl would ruin her life like this. Cheryl smiled. So what if you're angry? Cheryl played with her curly hair and sneered. Nick doesn't believe you. Your father doesn't believe you either. You can go abroad and live on your own. Natalie was furious. Why are you doing this to me? Why are you ruining my life? Why? She rushed forward hysterically and wrapped her hands around Cheryl's neck. But Cheryl didn't resist. She only blinked pitifully at her. Sister, don't hurt me. Last night really wasn't my fault. What are you doing? Hearing the commotion, Tom rushed out, looking so angry that the veins on his neck stood out. He raised his hand and pushed Natalie to the ground. Are you crazy? Are you trying to kill your sister? Natalie fell to the ice-cold sidewalk where she remained. Unable to bear the pain any longer, she was on the verge of tears. She thought of her mother and her childhood. But no matter how hard she wished, she could never return to that time. Rosemary, her stepmother, came up behind her. When she saw the marks on her daughter's neck, she was so angry, just like her husband, that she raised her hand and slapped Natalie. You uneducated brat! You're just the same as your mother. You might as well die. The more she slapped, the harder each slap became. Tom stood beside her, but he only seemed to be concerned about Cheryl's injuries. As the attack went on, Natalie's vision grew blurry from the blows, but all she could feel was the coldness in her heart, as if all warmth had left it. At that time, in his office at the Claire Group, Bryce was looking at his assistant with a malicious expression. What's going on? His voice was so gloomy that his gaze could bore holes through a person. How is the investigation going? His assistant was sweating under his gaze, but he swallowed and told him the news. It's Evan Wilson. Bryce knew of Evan. A while ago, he had worked with the Claire Group on a project and had taken many kickbacks from it. Bryce didn't like his way of handling things, so he had sent his men to destroy the Wilson family. Right now, the Wilsons were on the verge of bankruptcy and collapse. Evan bribed the hotel's waiter and drugged you. He probably wanted to use this too. The assistant's voice trailed off until he was no longer breathing. The situation was clear now. Evan was behind all of this. Bryce had never thought that something would go wrong and that he would have to completely deviate from his original plan. I checked. Evan booked a room in the hotel last night. The assistant looked up at him hesitantly, then looked down again. But you didn't use it. Bryce's expression suddenly changed, and he asked in a low voice, What do you mean? The assistant was confused. He could only look at his face and repeat hesitantly, You didn't use the room yesterday. If he didn't go into his room, then who was the woman who had been lying on his bed? In his mind, he saw broken images of her flushed cheeks and her body writhing beneath him. But what he remembered clearest were those cries of grief and heartbreaking pain. He suddenly remembered the crimson spots on the sheets that he had noticed before he left. The woman had been a virgin. Bryce's brows knit together. He told his assistant in a deep voice, Go check the identity of the woman who was in my room immediately. He wanted to know where she had come from. The assistant immediately hurried off to do as he had been told. But no matter how fast he moved, he wouldn't be able to find any useful information. The hotel's surveillance tapes had already been wiped by Cheryl. How could she possibly leave behind evidence that would show that she had set Natalie up? Naturally, she had to cover her tracks. After doing this, she continued to pretend that she was innocent and gloated as she watched Natalie get kicked out of her house in a sorry state. Natalie didn't even stay a night before she was packed off and sent out of the country. She lugged her heavy luggage onto the plane. She had been exiled without knowing when she could return.
Don't let your excitement die! The full audio series is on the Pocket FM app. Tap the link in the description to install now.